Hi everyone. Welcome to the Awaken Your Truth Conversations. My name is Denise with DeniseSimone.com. And today I am super excited to be talking with Lindsay Marino. Lindsay is an international psychic medium, a radio host, and author. And during her second day of teaching elementary school, third grade, she lost her fiance in a tragic motorcycle accident. And during this time, her heartache turned into a spiritual awakening and her gift was uncovered. Lindsay was one of the few mediums chosen to train with world-renowned psychic medium Lisa Williams. She's the co-author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, 365 Days of Angel Prayers. She has been featured in Soul Love, Evolving Soul magazine, and seen on Low Country live television. She now teaches others how to tap into their own intuition and connect with past loved ones in her online courses, Unlock Your Inner Medium and Unlock Your Intuition. And I have also had the personal experience of working with Lindsay in her private session more than once, and both of them were extremely powerful and very, very healing. And they also offered me a lot of guidance and a lot of validation on my own path. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yes, this is great. So these conversations are really about understanding the idea of stepping fully into your authentic self and being in your own personal truth. And we hear this word authenticity so much, right? And sometimes it could be a little confusing about what that really means. You know, even in the spiritual world, in the healing world, and the self-help world, however we want to say it, there's almost like this thread of something being wrong, and we have to make it right. Right? Would you agree with that?
Definitely. I feel like it's funny because I just posted something on social media the other day, how we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect or, maybe to put other people on a pedestal, but really the big thing is to know that, we're here as humans and we're still learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay not to have everything perfect.
Yeah. And there's really nothing to fix because it's about us being in our fullness, in being in our wholeness of both our human side and our spiritual side. And I feel like sometimes there's a misunderstanding about that.
Right.
So I think your story is so perfect when it comes to this topic because it really shows your journey through opening up to both sides of yourself and really integrating them. I think you're just a really beautiful example of how you ground the two and you allow them to work so beautifully together. And I know that was a journey for you.
Yes, definitely. It was not easy. I would, if you were, rewinding back to 2007 right now, you'd see me in, oversized sweatshirts and, wouldn't have any makeup on, wouldn't leave the house unless I was going to work.
Yeah.
And that's about it. So if you really looked back in 2007, you'd say, oh my gosh, this is a totally different person because it was not easy.
Incredible. So let's take you back to way back to when you were a little girl. Because I think everything's connected, right? And like our whole journey is connected. There's little bits and pieces of the puzzle that when we look at the big picture, we can see how everything kind of just fits together, right?
Yeah.
So for you, tell me about your childhood. Tell me what life was like for you then.
Okay, so I grew up in a town 20 minutes outside of the city of Boston in Massachusetts, and I'm Catholic, so I grew up Catholic. My grandparents were very much into going to church and that sort of thing, and my aunts too. I remember that was a big thing. I was always drawn to the Blessed Mother and the Rosary. I just loved praying to the Blessed Mother. I love saints. I went to CCD where I would learn about all of the saints. And I remember studying about St. Catherine of Siena. And she used to pray on each step, and she'd pray the Hail Mary. And I was so drawn to being, like her. I don't know where it came from. It was just something that I loved to do. And I like to be alone. I remember, going outside on the swing set by myself. And everyone would say, what's Lindsay doing? She's always thinking about something. I was always observing and thinking and very quiet. And then as I grew up, I used to collect rocks. I'd call them rocks, but really now I know they're crystals, and there was more meaning to them later. And I was just drawn to collecting different ones. I didn't know the meaning behind them. I didn't understand the energy on a conscious level at the time, but now I know that I was drawn to them for a reason. Another thing that happened to me when I was really little was I used to leave my body. I used to have a lot of outer body experiences, and I loved doing it. I would float around and see my mom and my grandma coming in from grocery shopping, and I remember floating above them, and I loved feeling that feeling of freedom, but at the same time I was bittersweet because I would try to wave at them and just say, hey, look at me, I'm right here, but they couldn't see me.
Wow.
So I remember that really clearly. Even till when I was in high school, I was having outer body experiences off and on. Recently, I've been wanting so badly to get to the place of having more of them, but it's almost like when you want something so badly, it doesn't happen as easy as it would if you're not thinking about it.
Yes, you're attached. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
My mom used to say when I was little that she knew when it was a full moon. If I was being moody or having a temper tantrum, she said, uh-oh, it's a full moon out there, because they would go off of me being that, radar. Okay, wait a second. We need to figure out what's going on outside. So I was really quiet, but I held a lot in too. So I was quiet at school, but when I was home, my mom said, you were always having temper tantrums. And I think that I was also feeling the mood in the house too. So I would take on a lot of energy of, things that were happening in the house. Not saying I'm not taking ownership of me having temper tantrums, but I felt the energy of different things. I was very sensitive to a lot of, to the environment too. That was something I had a lot of sensitivities to.
Yeah. So all of this that's happening to you in your young years, as you moved more into adolescence, did you feel like a lot of this kind of dropped away?
Yeah, it's funny because thinking back to that, so when I moved to adolescence that year, I was always giving advice to people. So people were coming to me, whether it was adults or even, it's funny, neighbors. I remember taking a walk outside, and one of the neighbors was talking to me about her daughter going to get her license or her permit, and she was nervous about it. And I don't remember what I said to her, but after the conversation, she said, I'm so happy that I talked to you. I feel so much better. And I'm thinking, what did I just say to her? It just came out of me. It kind of flowed. And I didn't really know her that well. It was just a natural thing for me to give advice. I didn't recognize what was happening to me, but I was getting really drained. I was always tired. Because I was giving advice to everyone, and it was just something that they would come to me, and I like to give them advice, but they would be energized and I would be completely drained.
Yes.
And I lived, the high school life of going out to parties and having fun, I was big in going out, and I loved everyone. I was always out with everyone. And even going into the college years, it was always in the back of my mind, but I got so busy with going and doing college things, going to parties, and kind of pushed it. It was always there, but it wasn't like I was reading books on angels like I used to when I was a child.
Wow. Okay. So then life takes us right where we need to go. And you met your fiance.
Yes. So his name is Nick, and I met him right after, it was actually right before I graduated, but I was in Florida at the time at University of Tampa. So I met him.
During your college years?
during my college years, but I graduated in 2006 because I went away to study abroad in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So I graduated in December. Um, and it was right around that time. I remember it was around graduation that I noticed him. But it was after that January, that I was able to actually speak with him. So it was probably, I want to say at that time, February, March, around that time, that I ended up actually having a conversation where it wasn't just a quick conversation. But it's interesting how it happened because when I first spotted him, I remember saying to my friends out, and I said, I feel like I know him. I don't know where this is coming from, but I just feel like I know him. And, a friend of mine's like, oh my gosh, you're crazy. I'm like, no, I feel like I know him. I don't know what it is. So at the time, I tried to walk across the room that I was in. It was out at a restaurant bar. And I ran into someone that looked identical to him with the same type of hat on. And I said to my friend, I said, that's not him. That's not who I'm imagining. She said, how do you know? I'm like, because that person doesn't have the same soul as him. I know that this isn't the person that I just spotted. And she's like, she didn't understand it, but I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
And when we met, we kept on saying it feels like we've known each other forever. So it wasn't like, this a relationship that you might feel with every person that you meet.
Right.
It was a soul connection that we felt.
Okay. And so you started dating and you were engaged, right?
And this is actually a perfect topic that I want to bring up because
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about being authentic and different things like this. So what happened is when I was with him, we spoke about marriage, and we spoke about he actually had a ring from his mom. His mom had passed when he was 12, and he talked about her ring, and he said, I want to give you that ring. He talked about giving me the ring for symbolism of being together. And the night before he passed, we again talked about marriage. Before he passed, we never got to actually have a physical ring of engagement. It was after he passed that he came through during readings and said to other mediums and psychics, I'm not just her boyfriend, I'm her fiance. So whenever I share the story about, when I'm telling, even with my bio, her fiance, it's been a big topic that's come up recently too. Because I remember, and this is kind of going back, I'm kind of scattered around with the story,
Okay.
but I want to fill you in on everything, because this is really important. I was sitting in past life regression, and this is a whole other topic, but
mm-hmm.
I was sitting in past life regression after he passed, and past life regression I wasn't fully open to before. And then I started to get signs and being nudged to really go into it. And I started to read Brian Weiss's books on past life regression and the power of going back into time to see how it relates to your current life. So I found this lady in Florida to go to, and I was sitting with her, and I said, I really want to connect in with my past lives because I felt like there was so much deepness to Nick and I's relationship. And I wanted to see if he was in any other lives with me because I felt it. So when I was sitting there, she wanted to talk to me about my current life. And she said, so how do you feel about, what's going on? And I said, I really don't want to go into this. I'd rather just skip to the past life regression.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to talk about grief. I didn't want to talk about any of that. Well, the conversation started coming up. And I said, we were together for such a short amount of time. And there are some people that didn't meet me that were connected to him. And we started to talk about that. And she said, how does that make you feel? I said, it makes me feel really upset because I feel as though, people didn't know what our relationship was like. Even though we were together for such a short amount of time, it felt like it was for lifetimes.
It's so funny because now that you're telling me this,
Yeah.
I didn't know this part. And
Yeah.
from just, knowing about you and seeing your video story, it felt like you guys have been together for so long before he passed. That's the essence of the energy of how it's brought out now when you talk about him.
Yes.
So now that you're saying this, I'm just blown away.
I know. And it's funny because this topic keeps on coming up, but you're the first one that we could have a conversation on video about this. And it's in my book too, because my
Okay.
book is coming out. I need to finish the book, but it is in that. But I think it's important to talk about too, because someone that might know him would say, fiance, well, she didn't have a ring, you know? But I want to go back to the past life regression person, because the
Okay.
past life regression lady, when she was bringing me through, she said, how does that make you feel? And we went through the conversation, and she said, well, you guys planned on getting married. I said, yeah, I know we did. But she said, then why are you calling him a boyfriend? Wouldn't it feel better to call him your fiance? She said, the definition of fiance is a person that's going to get married. There's plan of getting married. Not everyone has a ring. I said, yeah, I never thought about it like that. And I kept on thinking about it. And I said, I don't know if that feels good to say. She asked me, does this feel good? I said, I don't know if it feels good, because now, this day and age, everyone has a ring. But after talking to her about it, I figured out, you know what? It does feel right. Over as time went on.
It's not the ring, it's the feeling.
Yeah, I know, it's the feeling and it's the conversation. And as time went on, I was connecting in with another psychic medium, and Nick was coming through. And I said something, I don't know what it was that came up in the reading. And the lady that was giving me the reading, she said boyfriend, and he got upset with her, not in a way that you'd really get upset, but corrected her and said, no, not boyfriend, fiance. So that's how that kind of came up in conversation. So it was almost confirmed through that.
Wow.
So sometimes I've, interchangeably used, and you'll see it through articles, because there's been newspaper articles when he first passed. It said boyfriend, and then it says fiance, and then it says love. So it's changed over time, but it's the essence of it, and it's in the book. But I'm explaining it to you so you understand too.
Yes.
Because we're talking about being authentic, and it's something that I've kind of gone back and forth with on how to say this for people to really understand what it's about. It's really not about the word. It's about what was,
Totally. And thank you for sharing that, because that's a perfect example of authenticity. It's what feels right. It's all in the feeling.
Yes.
And yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So now he's passed on, and this is really where you started to receive lots of signs and validation for where the journey was taking you. So can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So after he passed, I saw him at the foot of my bed. And when I say I see him, I didn't see him make any sort of facial expressions. It was more like a straight face. I saw him there. I saw him with the same hat that he would wear. He always wore this black hat on his head. Mm-hmm. And I could see him, and I closed my eyes for a second, and I opened them, and he was gone. So that was the first visitation from him. And then I would go to sleep at night, and I had a visitation from him in the way that I was sleeping, but my soul and his soul were connecting. So he said, you're not going to see me for a while, but I'm still going to be around you. And at that point, when I felt that, I wanted to ask him more questions. I was trying to, but he just stood there. And he didn't say this with, you and I are talking like this. He said it telepathically. When you have a dream,
yes,
and you don't need to hear the voice all the time. Mm-hmm. It's a telepathic communication. That's what it was.
Okay.
So everything else started happening. I see hearts and smiley faces everywhere. I saw his reflection in the water, with the ripples of the water. It was in the shape of his profile. I saw his profile in bacon grease that actually my husband and I had cooked the night before. And it's kind of crazy how it's happened, but he's come through my writing, and I've channeled writing from, I was writing to him after he passed, and then he responded through my writing. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what was happening.
That kind of just naturally unfolded for you?
Yes. Yes. And after all this stuff was happening, I was thinking, okay, I'm going completely crazy, or this is real. So I asked for more signs. So I would keep on asking for signs and said, please send me someone. Send me a psychic medium to confirm this. And that's what happened.
Wow. I have to tell you, before both of our sessions,
Yes.
I always received signs. I think I sent you some of them, smiley faces. And
Oh,
this
yes. Yeah.
and this morning I went on a run before our conversation and I saw two hearts on the road.
I love that so
And they
much.
were like old pieces of tire. And they, like these strings of tire. Because the first one, I just kind of, kept running.
Yeah.
The second time I saw one, I thought, what? So then I went down to feel it, and it was just an old string of tire, and it was shaped in a heart. I know.
I love that. That's a perfect example of becoming aware of it. And that's what it is. It's like it might not be a perfect heart made of like plastic or something. It's
Uh-huh.
actually our environment that has these signs in it.
It's
That's
crazy.
amazing. Okay, you're gonna have to send me the picture after
It's
if you have a
crazy.
picture, I don't
Well,
know.
the ones that I sent you were the last time before our reading, and
Okay.
it was a smiley face in the shape of two. I was actually in a restaurant in the kitchen because
Yeah.
I was working in a restaurant at the time, and the chef told me I'll send it to you again, and he said, "Look, a
Okay.
smiley face," and it was like,
Oh yes, I remember that.
yeah, and there was a picture of a smiley face in the frying pan, and it was just the night before I was going to have a reading with you, and I was like, this is too crazy.
Gosh, I
Yeah.
love it. A lot of people will end up tagging me in stuff with the smiley faces and hearts, and I feel like there's a reason. And it's amazing.
Always a reason.
I love
Okay.
it.
So now you're fully feeling guided, right?
Yes.
You've met another psychic who can confirm that this was real for you.
Yeah.
And initially, when this was all happening for you, were you feeling, I mean, obviously you were going through so much grief, right? You were
Yeah.
experiencing between going through that emotion and really giving yourself that space to heal. And then on top of it, getting all of these signs. And I mean, how did that feel? Was that overwhelming, or did you feel, was it offering you peace even though you were going through the grief?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So each time I would spot a sign, it wasn't like I was searching for it, because some people listening might say, well, you're searching for it, but I really wasn't. I was just kind of taking a walk outside and I happened to look up and, there would be a sign right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
It gave me so much peace. I remember one day I was walking to the mailbox at my apartment complex, and I was taking a walk feeling just like I can just feel that sickness in my stomach. Like I don't want to eat, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to see anyone, I don't want to pick up the phone. And this guy was walking in front of me and he had his hat on the front way, okay? But I could just see the back of him. And all of a sudden he took off his hat and flipped it around and faced me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Nick's hat.
Wow.
And I just happened to look up at the right time, but it was a feeling. It wasn't just seeing the hat. It was the goosebumps that I got at the same time. It was the love that I felt. And it was just, he was nudged to do that, whether he realized it or not. And I was nudged to look up at the right time.
Yes.
So it gave me peace and it made me smile when I was feeling these things. But in between all of this, I was just functioning. I was just kind of going through each moment. Now, the psychic medium that gave me a reading, I didn't know him at all. He was out to eat with a friend of mine that was a complete skeptic at the time, and Nick was coming through. And I would meet up with him regularly. I didn't really see many other people. I would keep in touch with Nick's family and talk to them on the phone, but I would meet up with this psychic named Jason and we would go out to eat. We became good friends. We're still good friends. And he would give me messages from Nick. And I remember I had napkins filled with the messages that would come through. So it's interesting, but that really did get me through was Jason giving me those confirmations that yes, Nick's still around you, and me receiving those messages directly from him and having those visitations. But at the same time, I was frustrated with a lot of people around me. And it's not like they were doing anything wrong. I just felt like nobody understood what was happening with me. But I realized later that they weren't meant to fully understand because that was between Nick and I.
Yes. And it was your own personal experience, your own personal journey.
Yes.
And, this part of it is really important to understand because whether it's something that you experienced or any kind of painful experience in life, it's so important to, again, going back to authenticity, it's so important to really allow yourself to feel your true feelings and to process them. And I think a lot of, like, a big message that I like to provide for people is that it's about honoring your truth and the feelings that you have in the moment, rather than trying to just slap on a positive spin,
Yeah.
and try to shift it so you're avoiding the feelings to make life easier, but it always
Right.
backfires. It always backfires.
Yes. That is so true.
And I love that Anita Morijani quote where she says it's so much more important to be your true self than to be positive. Such
Yes.
a such a simple statement, but it's so powerful, because I think a lot of what's going on in the world today is that people are not owning up to their real feelings. And if we're not owning them, we can't release them. And then she goes on to say that the irony of that is that you do become more positive when you do give yourself permission to feel, right? So when you were going through this, were you getting that message from people?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And before he passed, I was the type of person to be constantly positive. I'm not saying that I'm not now. I am positive, but at the same time, with him passing, I kind of was like, you know what? I have nothing else to lose. I might as well just, this is who I am, and that's that sort of thing. It was definitely a process,
Mm-hmm.
because I got a lot of resistance from myself and the people around me when I stood in my power with this spiritual awakening too. A lot of people thought, okay, you're completely crazy, you've lost it. And they probably still think that.
Yes.
But I
Yes.
don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be honest, like, I don't care if they don't believe it, because it's not part of their journey
Right.
and they're not ready for it. And I understand when I was in that space where I used to think it was a sin to go to a psychic and a medium. I used to think like that. And now that's what I uncovered. I had, within me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that definitely, I hope I just answered your question. I forget what you just asked me, but
Yeah,
but
just when you were going through that, and you were receiving these messages of, it was going to be okay, it was going to be okay,
yes.
you kind of just put that aside and allowed yourself to just heal in your own way.
Yes. Okay, that's a great point, because I had people saying, "Okay, it's time, Lindsay. It's been 6 months or it's been a year. You need to be doing this." I had people telling me you need to find someone and date someone to make you happy. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's not something that I wanted. I didn't really find my husband until 4 years later, and it was actually Nick's childhood friend that ended up being my husband.
Can
But
you
before,
just tell? I want to talk about that too as we go on.
yes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But go ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
So that's okay. So that was 4 years later, but everyone kept saying, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to, get out of the house, you need to start dating. And it wasn't about that. It was about me really feeling what I needed to do in the moment. And for me, it was living one moment at a time. And I made like a little list, and I called it my list of things to do before reaching heaven. And those things, doing those things like skydiving, doing a cross country trip, going to Italy, it really, throughout that time, the whole time I was doing it, I was seeing the signs and I felt really alive and happy. And I knew that Nick was with me during that time. But in between that, when I came back to my house in Florida after a long trip, it would be really, I'd get this wave of sadness come over me, and it would go back and forth. But if I listened to everyone else, I would not be where I was today, because I didn't listen to anyone. And everyone would say, and I didn't even like the word grief at all. I didn't like that word. People used to give me grief books. I used to get frustrated. They'd say you should go to a grief group or a grief counselor. I didn't want to do that. I kind of had my own way of doing it.
You did. It was like you were following your own guidance by doing exactly what you needed to do to heal. And
Yeah.
it's funny how when you were speaking about all the things that you did on your list, I feel like that was your healing.
It was.
That was your heal. Yeah, that was your own unique way of healing your heart.
Yeah. And it's funny because I've seen a lot of people, whether it's clients or even people connected to Nick or people that are connected to someone else that's passed. And I've seen their way of healing, which is totally fine how they do it. I've also recognized people that are afraid to talk about them because they're afraid it will bring it back up, or they're afraid to um, think of memories because or listen to songs. It took me a little bit to listen to certain songs on, the radio, but I'm so aware of every thought that I have. Even I just did a cross country trip with my husband in the summer, and we were talking about how much comes up during trips when you're driving in the car, because it is like a meditation and these thoughts come up in your mind, and wow, okay, I still need to heal that part, or
That's
I still need to
incredible.
go through that and not push it aside, but actually go through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important.
Yes, yes. I love that. Um, Gosh, there's so much I want to bring up here. So let's talk about how Nick brought you to your husband.
Okay. So how it happened was,
And I really love this because
yeah,
in this kind of situation, it just shows that there's so many blessings that came from this experience, the way it was meant for you. And I think when we're open like this, the life can show us miracles.
it's so true. And we're constantly receiving miracles, but are we aware of that they're happening? That's like the big question.
Right.
But that's so true. So at the time, let me think. Let me go back in time. There was one moment where I was on Facebook and I was connected to a lot of Nick's friends, some people that I had never met because he, was from a different state than I was and that we lived in. He was from Missouri. So Nick's friend Tony had reached out to me. He said one night he was on Facebook and my picture popped up and he saw my picture. He said he got this overwhelming sense of emotion. He said he actually had tears come in his eyes the moment that he saw my photo. He felt pulled to write a message to me. He didn't know me at all. He just knew that Nick and I were together before he passed. So he reached out to me and said, I just want to let you know that all of Nick's friends are here for you. And I forget what else. I'll have to find the message at some point because it has to go in the book too. We're here for you and we're thinking of you and we know that you're a special person, that sort of thing. And when he sent that message to me, I needed it so badly because I was having one of those moments. And it was like he was tuning into that and Nick kind of nudged him to do it. And he said the message was not coming from him. He felt it channel through him as he typed. And that was that. He sent me that message. I responded probably the next day. And I want to say months later, I just had this overwhelming feeling. I was putting something in the book and I wanted to know if Tony was one of the friends that was with Nick when his mother passed. And I wanted to get more information about that. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, do you mind if I talk to you a little bit about Nick's childhood? Are you going to be around? I didn't even know him. I just trusted what I felt.
Incredible.
And I had tons of his friends on my Facebook page, but for some reason I felt like I needed to reach out to him. And that was it. There was nothing more to it. Well, the moment we spoke on the phone, we knew there was something special there. And the first thing that kind of got me thinking differently, because I was not interested in anyone, was his voice sounded very similar to Nick's, but I felt a strong pull and connection to Tony. And Tony said, this was not our intention to reach out and be together. It wasn't like that. It was just, he had gone through a spiritual awakening himself before. And we were both in a point in our life that we were brought together. And right away we knew that it was Nick. So, that first conversation was hours on the phone. And then the next conversation was 8 hours. And then he came to visit. And we knew we were together right when we were on the phone. I don't know how to describe it in words. He does a better job of explaining it. But he also connects with Nick still. And sometimes he'll give me messages from Nick or even my grandfather and say, Nick is saying this or your grandfather is saying this. And it makes sense, stuff that he wouldn't have known.
Such a beautiful story.
I feel so grateful for it. I feel grateful to have someone that understands too, really gets it.
Totally gets it. Yes. So I want to shift gears just a little bit and talk about how this whole experience and this journey for you has brought you to tremendous internal change. And you mentioned it in the beginning of our conversation about change, and just to understand that when we're on this journey, it's inevitable,
Yeah.
and it's something that if the more we resist it, the more we struggle, right?
Yes.
So the way you were bringing it up in the beginning was about how the people around you were not so welcoming, right?
Yeah.
In terms of, or I should say, accepting.
Hmm.
So how do you deal with that? How is that
Yeah.
something that you work with in a way where you don't shut yourself off, but you can embrace it, accept it, and also work with it so you still stay in your center?
Yeah. That's a really good question because I feel like it comes in waves too. I think the big thing is when people, they might say that they're accepting or they might act like it, but energetically you don't feel it because I feel everything energetically.
Me too.
That's so if it was a stranger, I wouldn't even think twice about it. It wouldn't even bother me if there was a stranger, feeling a certain way or saying certain things. It's people that I know that I take it personal. And I had to kind of go through that. And there's been waves of it like, okay, I need to recognize this is not personal. This is something that they're maybe not ready for. It's their journey and I can't respond to it kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been a practice. It's still something that I work on. I think something was released this summer, actually, on my road trip. Something was released like, okay, I cannot take this personal. And there's an actual the law of non-resistance. So when your vibration is changing and rising, when your vibration is getting to a place of change in a good way, automatically the people around you don't know it, but their energy is feeling that like a resistance. And they might respond in different ways and maybe say things that don't make sense that match up to who you are. I'm trying to think of an example.
Have you
There's so
ever
many.
had somebody that really tried to give you that feeling that you weren't on the right path or that
Yeah.
made you doubt yourself?
Yes, there was one situation that I could think of. I did a motorcycle foundation for Nick, and I was doing it because I was dealing with a lot and I had to use my energy for something. So I thought, well, I'll make, this awareness type thing known. I made bumper stickers. I had bracelets made to get people to really first not forget Nick. That's what was in my mind. I wanted people to know who he was and that sort of thing. And maybe if they saw a young face on a bumper sticker, they'd think twice when they pull over and put on their blinker. And I had someone, I wasn't too close with her, but she was connected somehow in the group of friends from college. And she said that I was exploiting Nick. And in that moment, I wanted to hide and I got frustrated and angry. And then after I got out of the situation, I recognized that she wasn't really feeling what it was for. It was to get the message out and I had to use the energy for something. So that was one situation. It took me years to really think about that. And I felt hurt. It was something that really hurt me. With the spiritual awakening and the part with the mediumship stuff and connecting with him, I've had other people I know have felt like, okay, she's grieving and she's just making this kind of stuff up. And really with that, I have to realize that it's not about me. It's not about Nick. It's about the bigger picture, that people know that their loved ones are always with them and they're not alone and they're living through us and they don't want us to stop living.
Yeah, that's it. That you always have to go to service. You always have to go to service. Why was this gift given to me? you know,
Right.
and it just moves you right out of that.
I know. It's like taking yourself out of the picture and knowing that it's not about us. It's about the masses, really, about the ripple effects.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big thing, to know that everything that we do, our thoughts, our words, our who we are, if we're holding back, we're causing that ripple effect to come out differently. But when we're actually living in our truth, like even you doing this interview series, the questions that you ask, the people that you have on, it's rippling out to people that might not have seen it in this way before.
Right.
And it's huge.
Right. It's all about always keeping that central intention at your core, right? And
Yeah.
kind of tuning out everything else, or else then we get bombarded and we lose our,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's easy to do that. And it happens to me still,
Mm-hmm.
where I'll get something and then I'll say, okay, wait a second, I need to tune back into really what matters. And I catch myself. So becoming aware intuitively on where your energy is going, and what your energy normally feels like. And when you step into a room or a situation or a conversation, how it shifts, and recognizing, wait, this is not my energy. This is some, maybe an insecurity of someone else, or maybe it's something that they feel uncomfortable with, but it's not connected to
Yeah.
me.
Yes.
It sort of is connected to you, because whatever you see is a reflection of something that you might need to work on, and I'm saying work on. I know we talked about not having to fix ourselves, but maybe something that lives within us.
Right. Well,
That
it's about letting it go. It's
Yeah.
about first becoming aware of it, and being
Yes.
honest about it, getting really real and honest about how it affects us, and then being able to say, is it serving me or not serving me?
Yes.
And then letting it go. Right. I like to think of it like peeling away the layers, not trying to fix anything.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
it is like that one thing, the awareness for me to see something and I'm tuning into it, it's a clearing right there.
Yes. Yes. In that moment. Yes.
So,
So when you say we have to be really attentive to how we're feeling, and then we have this interaction with other people's energy, and it takes us off course, what would you say to someone who is not really sure about what feels right and doesn't feel right to them?
yeah.
What if somebody's strictly living from their mind?
Oh, that's a really good point. 'Cause I know how that is, because previously when I really wasn't in tuned with my intuition, it was always working. I was always
Yes.
in my head with certain things. I would say to really do things that you love, because that gets you out of your head. So if you're doing more things that you love, like really feeling free, like the other day we went to this humongous ball pit where you could jump in, like how kids go into like the discovery zone. There's like places where you can jump in,
Uh-huh.
big thing of plastic colorful balls. But we went to this thing. So we went there, and we had so much fun, and you forget everything that's happening, going on a trampoline, going to the beach, going swimming. I
Mm-hmm.
think that really gets you out of your head. When you can do more of those things, your mind it doesn't block things out, but when you're physically moving, it's getting you out of that over analytical type space of being in your head, but being able to recognize what your energy really feels like. So I would say to make sure that you're not afraid with being with yourself. A lot of people hold onto their phones, and I've done it too, where you are on Facebook when you're waiting in line at the grocery store, or you're on Facebook when you're sitting and waiting for something. Instead of being afraid to be comfortable in your own skin and getting off the phone, or having to be around people to fill up your energy, try to really focus it on having time for yourself. And I think that's where it's going to come into play, when you're in tune with your own energy and what you feel like normally in a normal state of mind. Then you can recognize when energy comes in to feel the difference, like, oh, this isn't mine. But if you're not with yourself, you're never going to know what it feels like.
Absolutely. So, is there anything you want to share with listeners? Anything that's really important to you that you would want people to know?
I feel like the big thing is that energy is, we are made up of energy,
Mm-hmm.
and energy doesn't die. So it can't be broken, it can't be separated by, space or distance. So just knowing that it's always alive. So everything that's within you is constantly moving. Everything that's around you, the chair that we're sitting in, that's vibrating at a certain speed. So once you're aware of the vibration around you and within you, you're going to start to notice really everything is connected in a way. So I'm saying to kind of know the difference between your energy and someone else's, but in the end, it really is one big energy wave. So the more we get in tuned with that oneness of feeling it, which you should go into nature to feel that, the more beautiful things are. And I always call it like that love frequency, where if you're aware of the beautiful things around you and you're aware of this, you're going to start to increase your awareness and more beautiful things.
Yes.
So just tuning into that. And that's when intuition comes so clearly, when you're on that frequency of doing the things that you love, becoming aware of the beautiful things around you, not feeling like you always have to be positive, but really tuning into everything, becoming aware of it all. And I would say to take time to write and see what comes out in your writing. I think writing is a huge thing.
Yeah, journaling is such a powerful tool and really tuning into your own truth, right?
Yes.
Into what matters most to you and to really get in touch with your own thoughts as opposed to everyone else's thoughts that you might have taken on and
Yeah.
think are yours, right? And so when you really put them on paper, you can see more clearly and question yourself. Questioning is also a powerful thing, I think, to really get in touch with what's yours and what's not yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah. So, where can people find you if they want to get a reading with you or take one of your phenomenal courses?
Yes. Okay, they can go to lindsaymarino.com.
Okay.
And there's different things on there. There's courses, there's options to book readings, and then also a lot of things related to intention. So malas, I have intuition and mediumship malas, and there's I told you about the rosary beads at the beginning.
Yeah.
I loved rosary beads as a child, and I really feel like everything's about intention. And I'm really excited about those too.
They're beautiful. They are gorgeous.
You.
They're gorgeous.
Thank you.
And the colors that you chose, they're just
I know, I loved them.
They're just so serene. They're gorgeous, yeah.
And it's funny because everything that I do with my business and things that I put out there, it's all with my intuition. And I chose those crystals because each one symbolizes something with intuition or something with mediumship, and the colors came up with that too. So thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much for being a guest today.
Thank you for having me. I loved being here talking. It went by so quick.
I know. Thank you for sharing your story and just being you and giving your gifts to the world in such a powerful way. It's really beautiful. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
Yes. So I will put all the links below so people know where to find you. And yeah, have a wonderful day, Lindsay. Thank you.
Thank you, you too.